I'm Benjamin, I'm 29 years old, and at my family's Christmas dinner, my own mother told me I was dead to her and written out of the family will because my wife was pregnant. Before I tell you about the gift I left on her coffee table that made her scream for 3 days straight, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far a story can travel. The air in my parents' house that Christmas was colder than the December snow blanketing the manicured lawns of our neighborhood. It was the kind of cold that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the people in the room. Every crystal glass, every piece of polished silverware, seemed to radiate a sterile chill. My wife, Sophia, who was 7 months pregnant and practically glowing with life, sat beside me, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Her warmth was the only thing keeping me from freezing over completely. We were all gathered in the formal living room, a place reserved for guests my mother, Eleanor, wanted to impress or intimidate. Tonight, it seemed we were the latter. My father, Henry, stared into the fireplace, swirling a glass of scotch, a master of strategic silence. My younger brother, Lucas, was slouched on an antique armchair, scrolling through his phone, a smirk playing on his lips as if he was in on a joke I wasn't privy to. "Well, Benjamin," my mother began, her voice as crisp and sharp as broken glass. "You've been quiet all evening. Surely you have something to share." This was it, the moment I had dreaded and prepared for. I took Sophia's hand. Her fingers squeezed mine, a silent signal of support. "Actually, we do," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I stood up, pulling Sophia gently to her feet beside me. "Sophia and I are thrilled to announce that we're expecting a baby. A little girl due in February." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's hand froze mid-swirl. Lucas finally looked up from his phone, his smirk widening into a look of outright contempt. My mother's face, already a mask of disapproval, hardened into something ugly. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine. Then she set the glass down with a soft click that echoed through the room. "I see," she said, her voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper. "So you've decided to go through with this mistake." I felt a surge of hot anger. "She's not a mistake. She's our daughter." Eleanor laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Don't be naive. I don't want you or that child in this family. You have made your choice, and now you will live with it. As of this moment, you're dead to me, Benjamin, and you are officially out of the will. The family inheritance will be protected from your poor life decisions." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. I had expected cruelty, but the finality of it still stole my breath. Sophia's hand tightened on mine. I simply nodded. "All right," I said, my voice eerily calm. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small, beautifully wrapped box tied with a velvet ribbon. I walked over to the marble coffee table and placed it squarely in the center. "This is for you," I said to my mother, not meeting her eyes. "Merry Christmas." Then, with Sophia by my side, I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of the life I had known. We didn't look back as we closed the door behind us, leaving my family alone with their shock and that one, small, unassuming gift. To understand why that little box held the power to detonate a dynasty, you have to understand what happened in the year leading up to that night. A year before that Christmas from hell, my life felt like a well-appointed, elegantly decorated, and completely empty room. I was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, a job I loved because it felt real, tangible. Every day was a reminder of the fragility and resilience of life, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of my family's legacy, built on 2 generations of lumber money and relentless social climbing. My parents, Eleanor and Henry Thompson, saw my career as a noble hobby rather than a real profession. To them, a man's worth was measured by his portfolio, not his compassion. Their life was a series of strategic alliances, and my designated role was to marry a woman from a similarly wealthy family to merge fortunes, not to be cleaning wounds and comforting strangers in the dead of night. I went through the motions. I attended the charity galas, my face aching from the forced smiles. I endured the painfully dull blind dates my mother arranged with the daughters of her friends. They were all variations of the same person, beautiful, polished, their conversation a rotation of trips to Europe, gossip about other wealthy families, and their own trust funds. I felt more like a commodity being traded than a person looking for a partner. Then, one chaotic Tuesday in the ER, she was rolled in. Sophia Martinez. A car had cut her off on her way to her studio, and she'd laid her motorcycle down to avoid a worse collision. The result was some nasty road rash along her arm and a sprained wrist. Even covered in grime, her dark hair a tangled mess, she was the most vibrant person I had ever seen. Tattoos snaked up her arms, intricate designs of flowers and mythical creatures, a living tapestry against the sterile white of the emergency room. "Well," she said with a wry grin, wincing as I began to gently clean her scrapes, "this is going to mess up my week's schedule. I've got a full-sleeve dragon that needs its final shading." "You're the artist?" I asked, intrigued. My voice came out a little huskier than I intended. "Owner, operator, and chief inkslinger," she said, nodding at her own artwork. "Guess I'm my own best advertisement. And right now, I'm an ad for wearing your leathers." We talked the entire time I was patching her up. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She was funny, sharp, and unapologetically herself. She spoke with a fiery passion about her art, about her close-knit family, about the simple freedom of riding her Harley on an open road. She came from a working-class Mexican-American family, a universe away from my own. She didn't ask what my father did or where our family summered. She asked what made me happy, what I was afraid of. She saw me, Benjamin the nurse, not Benjamin the Thompson heir. It was both unnerving and exhilarating. When I finished wrapping her wrist, I found myself hesitating, not wanting her to leave. "You know," she said, her dark eyes sparkling with mischief, "the doctor said I need to have this dressing changed in a couple of days. Maybe the guy who did such a good job the first time could, I don't know, do it again over coffee? Strictly for medical continuity, of course." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I think that's a medically sound recommendation," I managed to say, a real smile, not the plastic gala version, spreading across my face. That coffee turned into a 3-hour conversation. That conversation turned into dinner the next night. That dinner turned into a weekend exploring the coast on her bike, with me holding on tight, feeling the wind whip past, feeling more alive than I ever had in my parents' country club. With Sophia, I felt like I could finally breathe. She was loud and passionate and real. She loved my hands not for the signet ring my father insisted I wear, but for how they could be both strong and gentle. She didn't care about the Thompson name. She cared about the man who was slowly, hesitantly, learning to shed it like a skin that never fit. One evening, a few weeks in, I introduced her to my one real friend, Daniel, a fellow nurse. We met at a casual brewery, a place my parents wouldn't be caught dead in. Daniel, who had seen me at my most stressed and cynical, watched as I laughed, as I held Sophia's hand. Later, when Sophia went to the bar to get another round, Daniel leaned in. "Man, I've never seen you like this," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "You're happy, like, genuinely happy." "I am," I admitted, and saying it out loud made it even more real. "She's a firecracker," he said with a grin. "Your folks are gonna hate her." We both laughed, but a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. He was right. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely happy. I was in love, and in my profound naivety, I thought that my family, despite their obsession with status and appearances, would be happy for me too. I was so wrong. Looking back now, I can see I wasn't just falling in love with a woman. I was choosing a different life. And for a family like mine, that wasn't just a choice. It was an act of treason. Bringing Sophia home to meet my parents was, in hindsight, like leading a beautiful, vibrant lamb to a beautifully set slaughter. I tried to prepare her. On the drive over, I fumbled for the right words. "So, my mother, she can be a little particular," I said, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Sophia laughed, a rich, warm sound that filled the car. "Babe, my tia Rosa once interrogated my cousin's new boyfriend for 2 hours about his credit score, and his family's history of male pattern baldness. I can handle particular. Yeah, but this is different, I mumbled. It's a quieter, colder kind of judgment. My father, he just sort of disappears into the background. And my brother, Lucas, just don't let him get to you. It was the most pathetic warning in history. The moment we walked through the grand, echoing foyer, I felt the familiar chill. My mother, Eleanor, stood perfectly coiffed in a silk blouse and tailored slacks, her eyes sweeping over Sophia from the top of her messy bun to the tips of her scuffed leather boots. She didn't even try to hide her disdain. Her gaze lingered on Sophia's leather jacket and the visible tattoos of vines and blossoms that curled up her neck. Benjamin, she said, her voice dripping with a false airy sweetness. You didn't tell us your friend was so artistic. The word was meant as an insult, a way of marking Sophia as other. Sophia, to her eternal credit, didn't back down. She extended her hand, her grip firm and confident. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thompson. I'm Sophia Martinez. Ben has told me so much about you. My mother looked at her offered hand for a full 2 seconds before giving it a limp, 2-fingered shake, as if she were afraid of catching something. Charmed, she said, the word sounding like a curse. My father, Henry, gave a curt nod from his armchair, already retreating behind his newspaper like a tortoise into its shell. A classic Henry move. My brother, Lucas, sauntered over. He was 2 years younger than me, had never held a real job, and yet carried himself with the unearned arrogance of a king. He looked Sophia up and down like she was a piece of exotic meat. A tattoo artist, huh? Lucas sneered, a lazy grin on his face. So, do you ride a Harley and listen to heavy metal too? Only on weekends. Sophia shot back with a brilliant, unfaltering smile. Weekdays are for classical music and planning my world domination. It's all about balance. Lucas was momentarily stunned into silence, and I felt a surge of pride. But the victory was short-lived. Dinner was a relentless interrogation disguised as polite conversation. It was my mother's specialty. So, Sophia, she began, unfolding her napkin with excruciating slowness. Where did your family come from originally? My grandparents moved here from Jalisco, Sophia answered, her voice even. My dad owns a small construction company, and my mom is a teacher's aide. How lovely, Eleanor said, with an intonation that meant the exact opposite. It must have been a struggle. Benjamin's great-grandfather, on the other hand, built his lumber inheritance from a single sawmill. A true American legacy. The comparisons were constant and brutal. Every answer Sophia gave was met with a thinly veiled insult. Her community college education was practical. Her choice of career was a brave little hobby. Her apartment in a less desirable part of the city was so authentic. My father remained silent, offering no support, no intervention. At one point, I saw him start to speak, to perhaps change the subject, but a single icy glance from my mother cut him off completely. He shrank back into his chair, a man utterly neutered by his wife. Lucas, meanwhile, made snide comments under his breath, just loud enough for us to hear. When Sophia mentioned a piece she was designing, he muttered, I'm sure it'll look great on some sailor's bicep. I tried to defend her, to steer the conversation, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. Mom, Sophia is one of the most respected artists in the city. She's been featured in magazines. Oh, I'm sure she has, Eleanor replied, smiling that tight, awful smile. There's a magazine for everything these days, isn't there? The final blow came over dessert, a sad, flavorless lemon tart. You know, Eleanor said, directing her words at Sophia but clearly intending them as a lecture for me. One must be so careful about the choices one makes. They have a way of defining not just your own life, but the lives of future generations. A proper foundation is everything. The implication was a wrecking ball. Sophia was not a proper foundation. I clenched my jaw, my knuckles white on my fork. Mom, that's enough. I'm just making conversation, dear, she said, feigning innocence. It's so important to have these discussions. After we left, the car was filled with a heavy, suffocating silence. I finally pulled over to the side of the road, unable to drive another foot. "I am so sorry, Saf," I said, my voice thick with shame. "That was unforgivable. I never should have put you through that." She turned to me, her expression not angry, but profoundly sad. "Ben, it's not me they have a problem with. It's you. They're not angry at me. They're terrified of me, because I'm the person you're happy with, and they didn't pick me out of a catalog." She reached over and touched my cheek. "This isn't going to be easy, is it?" "No," I admitted, my heart sinking like a stone. "It's not." I knew then that I was at a crossroads. I could either retreat back into the gilded cage my family had built for me, sacrificing my own happiness for their approval, or I could fight for the first real, beautiful thing I'd ever had. Looking at Sophia, at her strength, her grace under fire, and her unwavering love, I knew there was no real choice at all. The months following that disastrous dinner were a masterclass in passive aggression. A Cold War fought through missed calls and pointed remarks. My mother would leave voicemails, her voice a syrupy blend of concern and disapproval. "Benjamin, darling, I'm just calling to see if you've had time to reflect on our little chat. It's so important to consider one's future." She'd send me links to articles about the daughters of prominent families who were still available, as if I were a product with a closing window of opportunity. My brother Lucas was more direct. He'd text me mocking photos of bikers or heavily tattooed people with captions like, "Saw your future in-laws at the mall today. LOL. It was juvenile and cruel, and it chipped away at me. Through it all, my father remained a ghost, a phantom presence in my life who never picked up the phone, never sent a text, never offered a single word of support. My relationship with my family was crumbling, but my relationship with Sophia was becoming unbreakable. She was my rock, my sanctuary. She never once asked me to choose between her and them, but she also never pretended that their behavior was acceptable. When I would relay the latest voicemail from my mother, she would listen patiently, then wrap her arms around me and say, "Her fear doesn't get to live here. This is our space." She was teaching me how to build boundaries, how to protect my own peace. One rainy Tuesday night, about 4 months after the dinner from hell, we were in her cozy, cluttered apartment, making pasta from scratch. Flour was everywhere, on our clothes, in our hair, on the cat. Music was playing, and we were laughing, truly laughing. It was a perfect, simple, ordinary moment that felt more luxurious than any black tie gala I'd ever attended. In the middle of kneading a particularly stubborn ball of dough, Sophia suddenly stopped. "Ben," she said, her expression shifting from playful to serious. "Yeah?" I asked, my heart doing a little flip at the intensity in her eyes. She wiped her floury hands on her jeans, took a deep breath, and walked over to me. She took my hands in hers, her touch warm and sure. "I love you," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. I know things are hard with your family, and I know this isn't the life you were probably supposed to have. But it's the life I want. With you. I don't want to wait for anyone's permission or approval to start it." She took a shaky breath, then, to my utter astonishment, got down on one knee right there on the flour-dusted kitchen floor. My breath caught in my throat. My mind went completely blank. "Benjamin Thompson," she said, her eyes shining with a mixture of love and nervous energy. "You are the kindest, strongest, most wonderful man I've ever known. You make me feel safe and cherished. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sudden. It was the most unexpected, most perfect moment of my life. Here was this incredible woman, flipping the script, taking control, choosing me, fighting for us. It wasn't a calculated merger of assets or a strategic social move. It was a raw, beautiful declaration of love in its purest form. "Yes," I choked out, pulling her to her feet and kissing her, tasting the salt of my tears on her lips. "God, yes. 1,000 times, yes." We were married 6 months later. It wasn't the grand affair my mother had always planned for me, the one that would have been featured in society magazines. There was no cathedral, no 1,000-person guest list, no talk of a divorce clause in a prenuptial agreement. Instead, we had a simple, perfect ceremony in a public garden bursting with late summer roses. Sophia's family was there in full force. Her parents, Javier and Maria, her 3 boisterous siblings, her army of aunts, uncles, and cousins. They welcomed me not as an outsider, but as a son. They were loud and loving and everything my family wasn't. They didn't care about my last name. They were just happy their daughter and sister had found someone who adored her. My colleague Daniel came and a few of our close friends. My parents and Lucas also came, after I'd made it clear that I was doing this with or without them. Their attendance felt more like a duty, a public performance of familial obligation, than a celebration. My mother wore black, a funereal choice that spoke volumes. She refused to smile in a single photo, her face a mask of rigid disapproval. My father looked on with a pained, haunted expression, a man trapped between his wife's icy disapproval and his son's quiet joy. During the reception, a lively party in her parents' backyard, her father Javier pulled me aside. He was a construction worker with calloused hands and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. He put a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. "Mijo," he said, using the Spanish term of endearment, "Son, you are family now. That means you always have a place at our table. You always have our support. My house is your house. Understand?" I felt a lump form in my throat, so thick I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my eyes burning. In that single, simple moment, I understood what family was supposed to feel like. It wasn't about blood or legacy or an inheritance. It was about unconditional love and acceptance. I looked across the yard at my wife, my beautiful, strong Sophia, laughing with her mother, and I knew I had made the right choice. I had chosen my own family, and I would protect it no matter the cost. Married life was a revelation. Living with Sophia was easy, comfortable. We built a home together, not a showcase of wealth, but a sanctuary filled with art, music, second-hand furniture we'd refinished ourselves, and an obscene number of plants. I continued my work as a nurse, finding a deep and abiding satisfaction in it that no stock portfolio could ever offer. Sophia's tattoo studio was flourishing, her reputation as a uniquely talented artist growing throughout the city. For the first time, I felt like a whole person, defined by my own choices and my own happiness, not by the suffocating weight of the Thompson name. My contact with my family dwindled to tense, infrequent phone calls with my mother. They were always the same. She'd start with a pretense of casual conversation before launching into a series of carefully worded questions designed to probe for cracks in my new life. "Are you two managing financially? I know a nurse's salary can be limiting. Is she still working out of that little shop?" Each call ended with me feeling exhausted, angry, and defensive. 6 months after our wedding, our world changed in the most wonderful way possible. Sophia was pregnant. I was ecstatic, completely overjoyed. The idea of being a father, of creating a new life with the woman I loved, filled me with a sense of awe and purpose I'd never known. We were going to have a baby. Family. Our family. It felt like the final, perfect piece of the life we were building together. After we'd had a week to let the incredible news sink in, to dream about names and nursery colors, I knew I had to tell my parents. A small, foolishly optimistic part of me, the part that still craved their approval after all these years, hoped that the news of a grandchild might be the olive branch that could mend the chasm between us. Surely, the prospect of a baby could soften even my mother's hardened heart. I called her on a Saturday afternoon. Sophia sat beside me on our lumpy but beloved couch, holding my hand, her presence a silent source of strength. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Benjamin," she answered, her voice cool and distant. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Mother," I began, trying to keep my voice light, positive. "I have some news. Some really wonderful news." "Oh." The disinterest in her voice was a physical thing. I could almost feel it through the phone. "Did you finally quit that dreadful job and decide to come work for your father?" "No," I said, my grip on the phone tightening. I took a breath. "Sophia's pregnant." We're going to have a baby. You're going to be a grandmother. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. It stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. I could hear her breathing, slow and controlled. I pictured her sitting in her pristine, white living room, a look of pure disgust on her face. "Benjamin," she finally said, her voice dangerously soft, stripped of all emotion. "Are you absolutely certain about this? Have you really thought it through? There are other options, you know. It's not too late to reconsider." The world tilted on its axis. My mind short-circuited. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it, my brain struggling to process the monstrous thing she just said. Other options. Reconsider. Did she just suggest my wife get an abortion? Did my own mother just tell me to get rid of my child because she didn't approve of its mother? What did you just say? My voice was a choked whisper. Sophia, seeing the blood drain from my face, sat up straight, her eyes wide with alarm. "Ben, what is it? What did she say?" "I'm merely suggesting you think about the consequences," my mother continued, her voice as calm as a surgeon's. "A child will tie you to that woman, to that entire family, forever. Think about the child's future, its lineage, its place in the world. Is this really the legacy you want to create? Is it fair to the child?" I snapped. The last thread of hope, of filial duty, of any lingering childish love I had for her, just vaporized. It turned to ash and blew away. "Don't you ever—" I seethed, my voice trembling with a rage so profound it scared me. "Ever talk about my wife or my child like that again? Do you understand me?" I didn't wait for an answer. I slammed the phone down, or rather, ended the call with a violent jab of my thumb, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I looked at Sophia, whose face was pale, her eyes searching mine for an explanation. "She wanted us to get rid of it," I said, the words feeling like poison in my mouth. "She called our baby a mistake we should reconsider." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated fury. She wrapped her arms around me, her embrace fierce. "We don't need them, Ben. We don't need that poison in our lives. We have each other. We have this baby." She was right. That phone call was the point of no return. The battle lines had been drawn. My mother didn't just disapprove of my choices. She was actively trying to destroy my happiness, to erase my future. The months leading up to Christmas were a complete freeze-out. We were conspicuously uninvited from Thanksgiving. My calls, not that I made many, went unanswered. It was clear we had been excommunicated. And that's when the idea for the Christmas gift began to form. It started as a flicker of white-hot anger, a desire to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me. But as the weeks passed, it evolved into something more. This wasn't about revenge. It was about liberation. It was about taking back the power she'd held over me my entire life. It was about building a fortress around my new family, one so strong that she could never, ever hurt us again. The decision to go to my parents' house for Christmas wasn't about seeking reconciliation. It was a strategic move, a final, decisive act in a war I hadn't started but was determined to finish. Sophia was hesitant at first, her protective instincts on high alert. "Why go, Ben?" she asked me one night as we lay in bed, her hand resting on her swollen belly where our daughter was kicking softly. "We can have our own Christmas here, just the three of us. We can start our own traditions. Why put yourself through that hell again? Because this isn't just about us anymore," I explained, my voice low and serious as I placed my hand over hers. "It's about Isabella. We had already chosen her name. I won't have her grow up with them holding this power over us, dangling the family inheritance like a weapon, trying to manipulate our lives. I need to show them that their approval, their money, their entire world means nothing to me anymore. I need to end this, sophomore, on my terms." She saw the unwavering determination in my eyes and nodded, her own expression hardening. "Okay," she said. "I'm with you. What's the plan?" My plan hinged on secrets. Every wealthy family has them. Skeletons rattling in closets behind designer clothes, and mine was no exception. I started digging. My grandfather, Arthur Thompson, the man who built the empire, had been a tough, shrewd, but ultimately fair man. He'd always had a soft spot for me, seeing a quiet integrity in me that my own parents mistook for weakness. He passed away when I was 19, and I remembered he'd once told me, during a rare quiet moment, "Never let your mother's ambition overshadow your own integrity, son. She wants to climb ladders, but sometimes the best view is from solid ground." At the time, I didn't fully understand. Now, his words echoed with prophetic clarity. I recalled my grandfather keeping a personal safe in his old study, a room my mother had preserved like a museum to his success. He'd given me a small, ornate key on my 18th birthday, telling me it was for something important, for when the time is right. I had kept it in a box of mementos, a curious keepsake whose purpose I'd forgotten. Until now. One weekday afternoon, knowing my parents were at a lengthy charity luncheon, I went to their house. My heart pounded a nervous rhythm against my ribs as I let myself in with my old key, the silence of the large house feeling heavy and oppressive. I went straight to the study. The safe was hidden behind a large, imposing portrait of my grandfather. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the hidden lock. It fit perfectly. Inside, there weren't jewels or stacks of cash. It was filled with documents, old ledgers, personal letters, and a thick, sealed manila envelope. My name was written on the front in my grandfather's familiar, spidery script. My hands shook as I broke the seal and pulled out the contents. It was a notarized, legally binding copy of his last will and testament. And it was not the one my parents' lawyer, Mr. Davies, had executed after his funeral. I sank into my grandfather's leather armchair, the pages trembling in my hands as I read. The official will had split the main estate and the business between my father and my mother, with identical trust funds set up for Lucas and me. But this document, my grandfather's personal and final will, was drastically different. He had left his entire personal fortune, a considerable sum separate from the main family business, including a massive portfolio of stocks, several real estate properties, and private investments, directly and solely to me. He had stipulated it was to be given to me on my 30th birthday, or upon the birth of my first child, whichever came first. The document included a letter, and his words felt like a voice from the grave. He stated explicitly that he was bypassing my parents because he feared their profligate spending and deeply manipulative nature. He wrote, "I leave this to you, Benjamin, because you have a good heart and a strong moral compass. Use it to build a life of genuine happiness, not one of hollow appearances." My mother had found this, and she had buried it. She had knowingly and deliberately hidden my true inheritance from me. The rage that filled me was cold, sharp, and clear. This wasn't just about emotional cruelty anymore. This was about deceit. This was theft on a grand scale. Fueled by this revelation, I kept digging. I remembered my brother Lucas's perpetually easy lifestyle, despite never holding a job for more than a few months. He drove a new sports car, wore designer clothes, took lavish trips. I started looking through the old filing cabinets in the study, filled with bank statements my mother had carelessly left behind. And there it was, a pattern of large, regular withdrawals from a family trust account designated for household and emergency expenditures. $43,000 over 2 years, moved in tidy increments to a separate account. An account under Lucas's name. She had been secretly funding his life of leisure while lecturing me about financial responsibility. That was it. I had everything I needed. I didn't take the originals. That would be too obvious. Instead, I took out my phone and, with methodical precision, photographed every single page of the will, every incriminating bank statement, every line in the ledgers that showed the transfers. This was the ammunition. This was the heart of my Christmas gift. This was the truth, and it would finally set me free. The week before Christmas was a blur of quiet, focused activity. My anger had subsided, cooling into a steely resolve. Every evening after my shift at the hospital, after Sophia was asleep, I would sit at our small kitchen table, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face, and assemble my gift. I felt less like a son scorned and more like a prosecutor building an airtight case. The centerpiece was a sleek, silver USB drive, small enough to be unassuming but large enough to hold the weight of my family's implosion. I created 3 folders on it, each with a simple, devastating title. Folder 1 was titled, Eleanor's Financial Management. Inside, I placed the high-resolution images of the bank statements from the family trust. I used a simple editing program to draw red circles around the transfers to Lucas. I created a spreadsheet that detailed the date and amount of each transfer, with a final, damning total at the bottom, $43,000. To add context, I also included a scanned copy of the trust's charter, which explicitly stated the funds were for property upkeep, medical emergencies, and family-wide educational pursuits, not for funding a 20-something's jobless lifestyle. It was a clear-cut case of embezzlement from her own family. Folder 2 was titled, A Mother's Love. This one was harder to compile, as it meant reliving years of subtle and not-so-subtle emotional wounds. I went through old emails, taking screenshots of her dismissive comments about my career. I do hope you find a real profession one day, dear. Her thinly veiled insults about my life choices, and her cruel words after I married Sophia. I suppose you've made your bed. The crown jewel of this folder was a detailed, timestamped transcript I had written immediately after the phone call where she suggested we terminate the pregnancy. I had written down her exact words, the cold, clinical tone of her voice still echoing in my ears. Reading them all together, in chronological order, painted a damning, undeniable portrait of sustained emotional abuse. The third and final folder was the kill shot. It was titled, Arthur Thompson's Final Wishes. Inside was a single, multi-page PDF containing the scanned images of my grandfather's true will. I made sure the notary's seal on each page and his signature at the end were crystal clear, impossible to dismiss as a forgery. To complete the package, I added a short, password-protected text file named Insurance. The file contained a single sentence. The original copy of this will, along with the key to the safe, are now in the possession of my lawyer, with instructions to file it with the probate court and investigate my mother for fraud should any harm befall me or my wife. It was a checkmate move, ensuring she couldn't simply destroy the evidence and pretend it never existed. I sat back, looking at the 3 folders on my laptop screen. It was a digital bomb, a Pandora's box of truth, containing enough destructive power to shatter the perfect, crystalline facade of the Thompson family forever. The night before Christmas Eve, Sophia came out to the kitchen, unable to sleep. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders from behind, resting her chin on my head and looking at the screen. "Are you sure about this, Ben?" she asked softly, her voice thick with sleep and concern. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Ever." There was no going back the moment she told me to get rid of our daughter, I said, my voice hard as granite. I reached up and covered her hand with mine. "This isn't just for me anymore. It's for Isabella. It's about her future. The promotion I just got at work, my salary. We can make it on our own. We don't need their blood money. But I will not let them keep what is rightfully mine, what my grandfather wanted me to have to build a safe and happy life for my own family. This isn't about revenge, sophomore. It's about justice. And it's about freedom." Sophia kissed the top of my head. "I'm with you," she said, her voice firm. 100%. Let's go burn it all down." The next day, I went to a stationery store and bought a small, elegant gift box made of heavy black cardboard and a deep red velvet ribbon. I placed the USB drive inside, nestled in a bed of black satin. It looked innocuous, expensive, like it could hold a piece of jewelry or a pair of cufflinks. An elegant gift for an elegant monster. As we drove to my parents' house on Christmas night, a strange calm washed over me. The years of anxiety, of trying to earn their approval, of twisting myself into knots to please them. It was all gone. I wasn't nervous or angry anymore. I felt clear. For years, I had played their game by their rules. Tonight, I was ending the game. I was walking off the field and setting the scoreboard on fire on my way out. When Sophia and I stepped out of the car and into the cold, crisp night air, I took her hand. It was steady in mine. "Ready?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes full of love and a fierce, warrior-like strength, and placed her other hand on her belly. "The three of us are ready," she said, and we walked towards the grand, brightly lit front door, not as supplicants hoping for a Christmas truce, but as executioners of a long overdue and very necessary truth. The storm was here, and I was holding the lightning in my pocket. And so we come back to that moment. The heavy oak door closing behind us with a definitive thud, the sudden, shocking silence in the grand living room, and that small, ribbon-tied box sitting on the marble coffee table like an unexploded bomb. I found out what happened next from my brother Lucas much later, in bits and pieces collected during his long, stumbling journey toward becoming a decent human being. But I can picture it perfectly now, with the clarity of a film director. For a few moments after we left, no one moved. The shock was a physical presence in the room, sucking the air out. My father, Henry, was the first to break the spell, downing the rest of his expensive scotch in one long, desperate gulp. The ice cubes rattled in the empty glass. "Well, Eleanor," he said, his voice laced with a raw bitterness I hadn't heard from him in years. "Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted?" "He'll be back," she scoffed, though her composure was visibly rattled. Her hands were clenched in her lap. "He's just being dramatic. He's always been overly emotional. He'll run out of money trying to support that artist and her baby, and he'll come crawling back, begging for our forgiveness." Lucas, ever her loyal soldier, chimed in, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Yeah, what's he gonna do? That nursing salary can't support him, a wife and a kid in any real comfort. And what's in the stupid box? Anyway, a framed photo of his ultrasound." He laughed, a short, ugly sound that died in the tense air. My mother stared at the box, a mixture of contempt and an unwilling curiosity on her face. For 3 days, she left it there, a monument to what she saw as her victory. She treated it as a symbol of my surrender, telling friends who called to wish her a Merry Christmas that she'd had a small family drama, but had handled it with a firm hand. But the box gnawed at her. The unknown was a variable she couldn't control, and Eleanor Thompson needed to be in control of everything. On the 3rd day, her curiosity finally won out over her pride. With Henry and Lucas watching, she picked it up. "Let's see what pathetic little plea he's left us," she sneered, untying the velvet ribbon with a sharp, angry flick of her wrist. She opened the box and saw the single silver USB drive. She frowned, her perfectly arched eyebrows knitting together in confusion. "What is this? A new playlist?" Lucas joked weakly. Eleanor took the drive and walked with regal purpose over to the antique mahogany desk in the corner of the study. She plugged it into her laptop. The drive opened, revealing the 3 folders, their simple titles stark against the screen: Eleanor's Financial Management, A Mother's Love, and Arthur Thompson's Final Wishes. Her arrogance instantly evaporated, replaced by a visible unease. She clicked on the first folder. Her eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the scanned bank statements, the spreadsheet, the $43,000 laid out in undeniable black and white. My father, who had followed her into the study, looked over her shoulder. His face went from passive to thunderous in a heartbeat. "What the hell is that?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Is that the emergency trust? What are those transfers to Lucas's account?" Eleanor's face went pale, a sickly white. It's a misunderstanding. He's fabricated this. It's a lie." But it was too late. Henry, moving with an uncharacteristic speed, snatched the mouse from her hand and clicked on the next folder. He saw the emails, the screenshots of text messages. He saw the detailed transcript of her phone call with me, her cruel suggestion that my wife get an abortion. His face, normally a mask of passive indifference, contorted with a mixture of horror and pure rage. "You told him to get an abortion?" he roared, his voice shaking with a fury I had never once heard from him in my entire life. "You said that about my grandchild? He's twisting my words. He's always been dramatic," she shrieked, her voice rising in panic as her world began to crumble around her. Lucas was now peering at the screen, his own face ashen as he saw his secret allowance exposed for all to see. "How did he find out?" he whispered, looking from the screen to his mother, his loyalty finally wavering. But my father wasn't done. His eyes, burning with a righteous fire, fell on the third folder. Arthur Thompson's final wishes. His hand trembled as he clicked on it. The multi-page PDF of my grandfather's will filled the screen. I was told the silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated shock, heavy and suffocating. They read the clear, concise legal language. They saw my grandfather's unmistakable, forceful signature. They saw the clauses bypassing them, the brutally honest reasons he cited, their manipulation, their greed, their obsession with appearances. They saw the truth in writing, that the vast personal fortune they thought was theirs, the ultimate source of their power and control over their children, was never meant for them. It was mine, the true inheritance. That's when the screaming started. It was my mother, a wild, primal scream of fury, disbelief, and cornered desperation. She lunged for the laptop, as if she could physically destroy the truth displayed on the screen. My father grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. "All these years," he hissed, his face inches from hers, his voice trembling with the rage of a man who finally realized he'd been a fool. "All these years, you lied to me. You stole from my son. You stole from me. You stole from my father's memory. He's our son," she screamed back, her face a grotesque mask of fury. "It was for his own good, and Lucas needed it. He deserved a comfortable life. He needed a job," Henry roared, shoving her away from him. "He needed a father, not a walking bank account funded by his mother's lies." The fight, Lucas told me, was biblical. Decades of resentment, of unspoken truths, of lies and silent complicity, erupted in a torrent of violence and venom. Vases were broken. Accusations were hurled like grenades. The perfect Thompson facade didn't just crack. It was obliterated, leaving nothing but the ugly, rotten core exposed for all to see. The police were called by a neighbor, startled by the noise of shouting and breaking glass. It was a complete and total meltdown. This was the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for sticking with me this far, you're awesome. If you could do me a huge favor and like this video and comment with the number 1 down below, it lets me know you made it to the climax with me. It really helps more people find this story, and it tells me that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The gift had done its job. The truth was out, and the fallout was only just beginning. The days following Christmas were strangely, surreally quiet for Sophia and me. We were in our own peaceful bubble, painting the nursery a soft yellow, assembling a crib with confusing instructions, and blissfully unaware of the hurricane tearing through my parents' home. We didn't answer our phones. We just existed in our own little world, a world of hope and anticipation. The first sign that the bomb had not just detonated but had caused catastrophic fallout came a week later. It was a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Benjamin Thompson?" The voice on the other end was formal, strained. "Speaking. This is Robert Davies." It was my family's longtime lawyer, the man who had handled our finances for 30 years. I've been instructed by your father to contact you. I've also been provided with a copy of a certain digital document by your own legal counsel. The will of your grandfather, Arthur Thompson. There was a long, heavy pause. I must say, Benjamin, in all my years practicing law, I've never seen anything quite like this. The document is authentic. I've cross-referenced it with your grandfather's private records, which I still hold. It's ironclad. I felt a wave of cold, hard validation wash over me. It was real. I wasn't crazy. "So what happens now, Mr. Davies?" "Well," he said, clearing his throat. "First, your father, Henry, has filed for divorce from your mother. He's citing irreparable differences and financial fraud. Second, per the instructions in your grandfather's will, which is now being officially executed, His personal assets will be transferred into your name upon the birth of your child, which I'm told is imminent. The process will begin immediately. Congratulations, Benjamin. Your grandfather was a very wise man. Divorce. The word hung in the air, heavier than I expected. I had anticipated chaos, anger, maybe even legal threats. I had not anticipated the complete and total dismantling of their 35-year marriage. It seemed my father's cowardice had a limit, and my mother had finally crossed it. The next call, a day later, was from my mother. Her number flashed on my screen, and I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the decline button. But Sophia, who was sitting beside me, gently touched my arm. Maybe just once, she said softly. So you can say what you need to say, and then it's done. I took a deep breath and answered, putting the phone on speaker. Benjamin. Her voice was a ragged, unrecognizable mess of fury and feigned desperation. How could you do this? How could you do this to your own family? Your father is leaving me. He's throwing me out of my own home. Lucas is a wreck. This is all your fault. You and that woman have destroyed us. I listened, my expression blank, my heart rate steady. The words that once would have twisted me into knots of guilt and self-doubt now felt like nothing more than noise, the desperate buzzing of a dying wasp. No, Mother, I said, my voice calm and even, a voice I didn't recognize as my own. You destroyed this family. You did it with your lies, your greed, and your cruelty year after year. You did it when you told me my daughter was a mistake that should be erased. This isn't my fault. This is the consequence of your actions. You are finally reaping what you have sown. But I'm your mother, she cried, the tears now sounding genuine, but they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. We can fix this. Just tell your father you made it all up. Tell the lawyer it was a sick joke. I'll forgive you. The audacity of it, the sheer, narcissistic gall of that statement, almost made me laugh. She would forgive me. There is nothing to fix, I said, my voice as cold as the space between stars. And there is nothing to forgive because you and I are done. You will not contact me, my wife, or my child ever again. Goodbye, Mother. I hung up before she could say another word, and then, with a strange sense of ceremony, I blocked her number. I blocked Lucas's number. I blocked my aunt's number. I systematically went through my contacts and digitally excised every person who had been a part of that toxic world. It was a strange feeling, like amputating a limb that had been diseased for years. It hurt, but it was also a profound, clean relief. A few days later, a thick envelope arrived from my father's lawyer. It contained legal documents related to the divorce proceedings and the initial paperwork for the inheritance transfer. Tucked inside was a single sheet of my father's personal stationery, a handwritten note. It was short, the handwriting almost illegible, as if written by a man whose hand was shaking uncontrollably. Benjamin, there are no words. I am sorry. I was a coward. I stood by and let her hurt you, and I did nothing. I should have stood up for you. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, and I don't blame you. Dad. I read the note and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just a vast, hollow emptiness. His apology was 29 years too late. It was a deathbed confession from a man who had let his spirit die long ago. I folded the note and put it away in a drawer. Forgiveness was a mountain I wasn't ready to climb, or perhaps never would. Right now, my only focus was on the future, on the new life Sophia and I were about to bring into the world. The Thompson family as I knew it was dead and buried. And from its ashes, my own family was about to be born. 2 months later, in the quiet, early hours of a February morning, Isabella Rose Thompson was born. She was perfect. She had my eyes and a full head of Sophia's dark, wild hair. Holding her for the first time, this tiny 7-pound being, I felt a love so overwhelming and primal it fundamentally rewired my entire soul. All the anger, the bitterness, the years of pain I had harbored towards my old family just seemed to melt away, replaced by a fierce, protective devotion to this tiny human. My world, which had once revolved around a desperate need for their approval, had now shrunk to the size of this little girl, and it was infinitely more vast and meaningful. Our world became a beautiful, chaotic whirlwind of sleepless nights, first smiles, and endless love. Sophia was a natural, a goddess. Seeing her with Isabella, so full of tenderness and strength, made me fall in love with her all over again. Her parents, Javier and Maria, were over almost every day, not out of obligation, but out of pure joy. They didn't call before coming. They just showed up, one with a pot of homemade soup, the other with arms ready to hold the baby so we could nap for an hour. They were the grandparents every child deserved, showering Isabella with affection, singing her songs in Spanish, and filling our small apartment with warmth and laughter. This was family. This was real. The inheritance from my grandfather came through, a sum of money so significant it felt unreal. A lawyer specializing in estate management helped us navigate it. But we were careful. We had seen firsthand how money could corrupt and destroy. We didn't change our lifestyle overnight. We paid off my old student loans and a few of Sophia's business debts. We bought a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house in a good, family-friendly neighborhood, with a big backyard perfect for a swing set one day. Most importantly, we established an ironclad college fund for Isabella, an amount that would ensure she could be whatever she wanted to be. A doctor, an artist, an astronaut, without ever having to worry about the cost. The rest was invested wisely, a safety net that guaranteed my mother could never again use money as a weapon against us. I also received a significant promotion at the hospital, becoming a charge nurse on the surgical floor, which came with a much better salary and more responsibility. For the first time in my life, I felt completely secure, professionally, personally, and financially. Life was good. It was peaceful. It was normal. Then, one sunny Saturday afternoon about 8 months after Isabella was born, there was a knock on our door. I opened it, expecting a package delivery, and my heart dropped into my stomach. It was my brother, Lucas, standing on my doorstep. He was a shadow of his former self. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a haunted, hollow look in his eyes. He was thinner, and his expensive designer clothes had been replaced by jeans and a faded t-shirt. He looked lost. "Lucas," I said, my voice a mixture of shock and suspicion. I instinctively shifted my body to block the view into the house. "Hey, Ben," he mumbled, scuffing his worn-out sneaker on the welcome mat, not meeting my eyes. Can I come in for a minute? Please." I hesitated, a war of conflicting emotions raging inside me. But something in his broken demeanor, the complete absence of his old swagger, made me step aside. He walked into the living room and saw Sophia on the floor, playing with Isabella, who was now a gurgling, happy baby. He froze, his mouth falling slightly open. Wow, he said softly, his voice full of a strange wonder. "She's beautiful." Sophia gave him a guarded, neutral look but nodded a polite hello, pulling Isabella a little closer. I led him to the kitchen table. "What do you want, Lucas?" I asked, my voice flat, giving nothing away. To my astonishment, tears welled up in his eyes. He slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands for a moment. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice cracking, muffled by his hands. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I was a jerk, Ben. A spoiled, entitled, awful person. Everything you ever thought about me was true. When everything fell apart after Christmas, the money stopped. Cold. Mom went crazy. Dad won't even speak to her. The divorce is a nightmare. I had nothing. I had to get a job. I'm working as a busboy at a diner downtown." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Cleaning up after people who treat you like you're invisible. And it's made me realize what a monster I was. What we all were. I'm so sorry for how I treated you, and for what I said about Sophia." The apology was so raw, so unexpected, that I was speechless. This wasn't the brother I knew. Then he took a shaky breath, leaning forward as if sharing a dark secret. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Mom, she hasn't given up. After she was forced out of the house, she became obsessed. She hired a private investigator to follow you. She has pictures, Ben. Pictures of you, Sophia, the baby, at the park, outside the grocery store. She's made a scrapbook. It's not right. It's creepy as hell. I found it when I was helping her move some stuff. I thought you should know. A cold dread washed over me. A chilling violation. The scrapbook. My mother was stalking my child. Lucas saw the look on my face. I'm done with her, Ben. I swear. I'm done with all of it. I want a chance to be better. Maybe one day I can be an uncle to that little girl. The reveal about the private investigator was chilling. A horrifying twist that proved my mother was even more unhinged than I had imagined. But Lucas's confession, his genuine, painful remorse, was an even bigger shock. The golden child had finally seen that all that glitters is not gold, and that his gilding was just cheap plate over a rotten core. Lucas's revelation about the private investigator changed everything. The fragile peace I had so carefully constructed was shattered. The idea of my mother, a woman I now considered a dangerous stranger, secretly collecting photos of my daughter, compiling them into some twisted scrapbook, it made my skin crawl. It was a violation of the deepest kind. A creepy, obsessive act that crossed the line from family drama into something much darker. My protective instincts went into overdrive. The very next day, I was on the phone with my lawyer. I explained the situation, my voice tight with a cold, controlled fury that was far more potent than my old hot-headed anger. He was appalled. "This is stalking, Benjamin," he said grimly, his voice devoid of any legal jargon. "This is harassment. Given her past behavior, the emotional abuse, the financial fraud, and the ongoing acrimony from the divorce, we can and we absolutely must get a restraining order. We need to create a legal wall around your family. We'll file it immediately." The process was ugly but necessary. It involved sworn statements, detailing my mother's escalating campaign of manipulation and harassment. We even subpoenaed the records from the private investigator Lucas had named, and sure enough, they showed regular payments from my mother. We now had undeniable proof. The judge granted the order without hesitation. Eleanor was legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me, Sophia, or Isabella. She was forbidden from contacting us, or hiring anyone else to do so on her behalf. It felt extreme, like something out of a bad television movie, but holding my daughter in my arms, I knew I would walk through fire to keep her safe. My mother, predictably, did not take this well. A week after the order was served, I was called into the office of my boss, Dr. Reed, the head of nursing. My heart sank. I immediately feared the worst, that my mother's poison had found a way to seep into my professional life, the one place I felt truly competent and respected. "Ben, have a seat," Dr. Reed said, her expression serious and unreadable. I sat, my hands clammy, my mind racing. "Is everything all right? I received a very disturbing phone call this morning," she said, her eyes watching me carefully. "It was from a woman claiming to be your mother, Eleanor Thompson." I braced myself. "What did she say?" "She claimed you were unstable," Dr. Reed said, her voice even. "She said you were suffering from a severe case of postpartum depression yourself, that you were erratic and a potential danger to your patients. She suggested that I should reconsider your recent promotion, and that the stress of the charge nurse position was clearly too much for you. She even made some vague threats about a potential lawsuit against the hospital for negligence if we continued to employ you in a position of authority." My blood ran cold. She had tried to destroy my career, the one thing that was entirely mine, that I had built with my own two hands. Before I could even begin to defend myself, to stammer out a denial, Dr. Reed held up a hand, stopping me. "Benjamin," she said, and a small, reassuring smile touched the corner of her lips. "You are one of the best nurses I have. You are compassionate, professional, and your colleagues respect you immensely. I've known you for 5 years. I also know that baseless accusations and threats are often the last resort of a desperate and manipulative person." She pushed a piece of paper across the desk toward me. "This is the direct number for the hospital's legal department. Give it to your lawyer." Inform them that we have a recorded copy of the phone call. We will fully support your restraining order and will take swift legal action against any further harassment or defamation. Now, she said, her tone shifting back to business. Get back to your floor. Your patients need you. I walked out of her office, completely overwhelmed with gratitude. For every toxic, destructive person like my mother, there was a good, decent person like Dr. Reed, a person who saw you for who you were and had your back. A month later, a final letter arrived, not from my father, but from his lawyer. It was a formal request for visitation, not with me, but with Isabella. He wanted grandparental rights. He wanted to know the grandchild he had never defended. I stared at the letter for a long time, the formal legal language feeling like an insult. He was still hiding behind lawyers, still unable to face me like a man. I wrote a short, simple reply, sending it through my own counsel. Henry, if you ever want to meet my daughter, you will have to come to my home, knock on my door, and ask me face to face. You need to look me in the eye and be a father. You can't use a lawyer as your shield anymore. Until then, the answer is no. I never received a reply. He couldn't do it. The cowardice that had defined his entire life was still his master. The shattered pieces of my old family were too broken, too sharp, to ever be put back together again. And I was finally, completely okay with that. 1 year to the day after that fateful Christmas, the air in our backyard was filled not with suffocating tension, but with the sweet smell of barbecue and the sound of genuine, unadulterated laughter. We were on the back deck of our new home, a home we had filled with love and warmth. Colorful balloons were tied to the railings, and a hand-painted banner that read, "Happy First Birthday, Isabella," hung crookedly over the patio door. It wasn't just a birthday party. It was also our second wedding. Sophia and I stood under a simple wooden archway she and her father had built, decorated with flowers from her mother's garden. We held our daughter, who was dressed in a tiny white dress, between us. Our audience was small, but it was everyone in the world that mattered. Javier and Maria, beaming with a pride so bright it was almost blinding. My work colleague Daniel, who had been my rock through so much of it. My boss, Dr. Reed, who had come with a thoughtful gift for Isabella. A handful of our closest friends, the family we had chosen for ourselves. And, standing quietly in the back, holding a small, awkwardly wrapped gift, was Lucas. He'd been true to his word. He was working hard at his busing job and had just enrolled in a class at the community college. He had moved into his own small apartment and had been tentatively, carefully, building a relationship with me. It was a slow process, filled with cautious conversations. He visited every few weeks, always respectful, always sober. He was learning how to be a person, not a caricature of wealth. He wasn't the brother I'd grown up with. He was a new man, humbled by his spectacular fall from grace. He brought Isabella a small, hand-carved wooden bird for her birthday. He was trying. It was a start. He was a piece of the wreckage that might, one day, be salvageable. As Sophia and I exchanged our vows again, not as two young people starting a life, but as a battle-tested family of 3, reaffirming our unbreakable bond, I looked out at the faces of the people who loved us. This was my world now. This was my tribe. It wasn't built on a prestigious name or a bloated bank account. It was built on respect, on laughter, on showing up for each other when things were hard, on unconditional love. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Isabella was sleeping soundly in her crib, her chubby hand curled around my finger, Sophia and I sat on the back deck, looking up at the stars. "A year ago," I said softly, my voice filled with awe at the distance we had traveled, "I thought I had lost my entire family." Sophia took my hand, her fingers lacing through mine. "No," she said, her voice full of a gentle, unwavering certainty. "A year ago you left a house. You left a building full of ghosts and lies. Your family was right here with you the whole time, just waiting for you to come home." She was right. The money from my grandfather was a blessing, a tool that gave us freedom and security, a way to fight back. But it wasn't the real inheritance. The real inheritance wasn't something you could find in a will or a bank account. It was the quiet strength he saw in me. It was the fierce, unwavering love I found with Sophia. It was the beautiful, perfect daughter we created together. It was the profound realization that the best Christmas gift I ever received was the courage to walk away from the people who were supposed to love me, so that I could finally build a life with the people who actually did. And that was a fortune no one, no matter how cruel or powerful, could ever take away. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It's a reminder that sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations, and that true family is about who holds your hand, not who shares your bloodline. Have you ever had to make a tough choice to protect your own happiness? I'd love to hear about it. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I share next.